welcome to the Fit and Healthy Today show. Today our subject matter is on schizophrenia. How this all came about is about a week and a half ago, I had a customer come in, and I'd known the gentleman for some time. And he's bipolar and schizophrenic, and he was fairly stable. He's always been friendly and nice. Well, a week and a half ago, he comes in and is wanting to question a product he purchased, and he became extremely aggressive, combative, and very, very scary. So much so that I was on the phone at the time with my son, and my son was coming to rescue me. The change in medications that he had taken place just the week before had completely altered and changed this man's personality to where I now felt he was a threat. So I started doing some research on schizophrenia, and I wanted you out there, as well as maybe some psychologists and psychiatrists, to consider what may be some other contributing factors to schizophrenia, and maybe some alternatives and testings that may need to be done to where people like me don't have to live in fear when a customer walks in who has a medication change. Definition, and it's pretty clear here, it's a mental illness characterized by abnormal or disturbed associations, reduced range of emotional response. They'll get detached from reality. Their feelings become all over the place. They'll have hallucinations and delusions of grandeur sometimes. 3% of the population at some time in their life will suffer from this. So that's 1 out of every 33.3% of the people out there. That's a high amount. Now, when we're looking at the causes for this, it appears to be based upon research all the way back to the 1920s, and I'm telling you, there was tons of research on this subject matter. We're definitely finding that they have an altered brain chemistry, and it appears to be either certain genetic enzyme deficiencies, or we're finding that they have inabilities to absorb certain nutrients that may be genetic as well. Sleep deprivation is one of the key things that we're finding. So when someone, hey, I'm a mom, and so I'm lucky if I get 5 or 6 hours sleep a night. And sleep deprivation can and does affect mental health. So people who go through long periods of that, we found was a contributing factor. Genetic excess of certain vitamins, particularly of niacin, the B vitamins. We can have toxicity of heavy metals, particularly copper and lead. And these literally should be tested for by all psychiatrists whenever they're dealing with schizophrenia, because these heavy metals can cause people to go cuckoo. It's literally, seriously, a mineral imbalance can do so, along with nutritional deficiencies, including B vitamins. I mean, if your B vitamin, particularly B12, B6, niacin, you can have hallucinations if you're deficient or you have a poor absorption of it. It shows itself in other ways as well, but it literally can affect your mental health. And with the majority of our population being so nutrient deficient, I suspect that this percentage is going to rise. Hence, I'm trying to give as much information as we can on what we can do to prevent at least the nutritionally caused schizophrenia, which appears to be potentially maybe 75% of the schizophrenia out there. So this needs to seriously be examined by the medical community based upon a lot of the research that's been out there. Hypoglycemia. The majority of schizophrenics are hypoglycemics. I know I'm hypoglycemic, and I know my blood sugars, my husband will tell you, it affects my mood. So if I run low blood sugars, I'll get dizzy, I'll get moody and cranky, and obviously not to these stages, but to where I obviously am not in a stable where I would be if my blood sugars were more stable. Gluten intolerance, we're now finding that certain gluten intolerances or inabilities or protein peptide deficiencies that don't allow us to break down certain foods, particularly gluten, can not only contribute to things like autism and other mental health issues, but to schizophrenia. So those all need to be tested for. Oftentimes we'll find that a traumatic experience will trigger schizophrenia. And that could be a death in the family, a spouse dying, divorces, where people don't eat, they're not getting enough sleep. All these wonderful nutritional types of things all kick in, and then they get sick and they go on antibiotics, and that destroys all their good bacteria, and then their glands all end up all imbalanced, their thyroid and their hormones and everything, because they're fatty acid deficient. So we have a person that becomes a complete wreck, and as a result has a propensity towards developing mental illness, and in some cases schizophrenia. So first and foremost, we have to look at nutrition. Now, when we're looking at nutritional issues as far as schizophrenics, hypoglycemic diets, and there was an old-fashioned diet called the zone diet, which was a 30-30-40, which is 30% protein, 30% fats, and 40% of complex carbs, avoiding all sweets, refined foods, soda, alcohol, pastries, canned, processed junk, okay? And so when we're doing this hypoglycemic diet, the blood sugars stay more stable. Eating lots of veggies, lots of nuts, whole grains. See, the nuts have essential fatty acids in them which keep our blood sugars stable, but those essential fatty acids also work on our hormones for hormone stabilization, as well as in our brain. So particularly when we're talking about really like walnuts, almonds, pecans, sunflower seeds, avocados, fish, good quality, wild Alaskan salmon, those are all necessary for blood sugar stabilization and for brain stabilization. When we're talking about supplements, I can't tell you the number of studies. And very few of the customers that walk in the door have any of the psychologists done any ample amounts of testing or addressed any of these potential deficiencies at all. So it's very, and I know I'm jumping here to the bottom, but the testings, when you're talking about vitamin and mineral, there should always be a vitamin and mineral analysis done by your doctor. Heavy metal testing, and we'll talk about the reasons for that. Histamine. Now there's low histamine and high histamine triggered types of schizophrenia that can occur. And you know, histamine we think of in terms of sneezing and having allergies. Yeah, histamine levels do affect, and histamine medications do affect your mental stability. So taking that all into account, that's why we've seen sometimes people that take these kind of antihistamines as having hallucinations and mental illness. Testing the sugars. Having allergy tests. Now I think this is paramount because, like I said, with gluten intolerances, if you have gluten intolerance or you don't digest certain proteins very well or grains very well, you produce toxic chemicals, and guess where those chemicals go? They go on the brain, and you're not going to be stable. You can't be stable. So it's very, very important that a good analysis is done by an MD or a psychiatrist that examines all of these factors. I really hope, as you know, I've stated before, I handled medical malpractice cases in the past, especially psychological med mal cases, and where doctors get sued because patients have reactions to medications. And I have to say that most of them were because of psychotropic medications. None of these factors were ever addressed, and now with the knowledge I have now, if I was an attorney, I could tear a psychiatrist apart if he didn't examine this. So, because the research that I'm about ready to talk about. A good multiple vitamin. I'm not talking about from your nice little chain food store. Go to a good health food store and get a good multiple vitamin that has minerals that are amino-chelated, you know, complete Bs, vitamin A, you know, all the necessary nutrients, and we're talking a good one. B50, 3 times a day. Tons of studies on that for nervous system support. When we're talking about specifically B50, there are specific B vitamins as well. Remember I mentioned B6, B12, B1, B2. They're all important for nervous system function. And there's tons of studies on those. Particularly we've seen them on primarily niacin. Now, when people see 3 to 30 grams, that's like 3,000 milligrams to 30,000 milligrams of niacin per day. If anybody's ever taken niacin, you know it can kind of make you flush. But these people oftentimes cannot uptake or utilize niacin. And so what happens is we kind of start them off slow, gradually build it up. And there's 1949 and 1962 studies that show a 75% success rate. That's a phenomenal number. Any medical person that's not attempting this, in my opinion, is guilty of medical malpractice. Because with studies like this, 75% success rate that prevented hospitalization on schizophrenics needs to be addressed with this vitamin analysis. Fish oils normalize the brain. I can't tell you the number of studies that I ran into on all different types of mental illnesses on fish and flax oil. There was a 1981 study that literally showed total reversals because oftentimes schizophrenics don't metabolize fatty acids very well. And so their brain literally doesn't transfer and process information well. So, tablespoon twice a day of flax or a tablespoon twice a day on fish oils, very helpful. Borage oil or evening primrose oil for hormonal stabilization. Oftentimes, as I mentioned before, glandular, and this should say down here on the testing part that we should probably also have some hormonal testings, but borage oil helps, as well as things like walnuts, almonds, and pecans, hormonal stabilization. Very important to get this combination of fatty acids. B12, methylcobalamin sources, sublingual under the tongue. A lot of people, now we're seeing a rise in schizophrenia among gastric bypass patients. Think about that. One of the key things that they can't absorb is B12. So that sublingual B12 that a lot of the gastric bypass patients are ignoring, very, very important on a daily basis. Please, docs, don't ignore that. Ester C, 6 to 40 grams per day. Remember how I told you that a lot of schizophrenics have histamine or low histamine or high histamine levels? Well, vitamin C deficiencies or the inability to utilize vitamin C will make histamine unstable, high, low, everywhere. And good dosage, divided dosages of mineral ascorbate C or ester C help with that stabilization. Now, folic acid. Now, there are certain times when you want more, certain times you want less, and when you have lower histamine reaction types of schizophrenia, you probably want less. But most of the drugs, the anticonvulsant medications, deplete folic acid stores, which makes schizophrenia even worse. So, if you're on these types of medications, anticonvulsants, I would strongly suggest, we're talking not 800 micrograms, we're talking 5, 10 milligrams, if not more, of folic acid, because these are going to block the utilization of folic acid. Zinc, tons of copper, lack of zinc, because it's not in our food anymore. So when the zinc levels are down, it really, your anxiety, you're looking around, you become phobic, just from being zinc deficient. Can you remember the number of people out there who aren't eating any organic fruits and vegetables and not taking a multi? Guaranteed they're zinc deficient. So in order to build up those zinc reserves and decrease the copper levels, we have to add in pretty good doses of zinc for a while. Calcium, magnesium relaxes the nervous system, the muscle tissues, and we're doing citrate forms for absorption. Please don't turn around and go to your local I could say the name, large warehouse centers and grab a calcium carbonate. It's not going to work. It's going to make your muscles tight and stiff and your nervous system upset. Manganese. There's a lot of Parkinson's types of symptoms that result from long-term usage of tranquilizers. Manganese in a good dosage removes some of these shimmers and shakes that happen when you're having or on tranquilizers. So whether you're schizophrenic or not, or using these anticonvulsant medications because of those, please consider manganese. Methionine detoxes histamine. Remember how I said most of the schizophrenics have high histamine? Methionine is an amino acid that can detox the histamine out of the body and lower those levels and bring it to a more normal level as well. Once again, I've just cited some things. There are other things. Tons and tons and tons of studies. And if I can please encourage anybody out there who has a schizophrenic member of the family, doctors, nurses, anybody, please address these issues for the safety of your patient as well as for the safety of the community.